you want to start with what are the 1 to 3 problems that you're going to solve. You can't go out and interview people if you don't know what problems you want to solve. Forget about the solution. What problems are you trying to address? Who needs those problems solved? Who's the target for this? And then, who are the early adopters? Because not everybody's going to adopt this. Not everybody loves technology. There's only a certain small group of people who will use this. Who are the buyers? I mean, we saw this in the challenge a lot where people couldn't figure out who would pay for it. And that's clearly like really, really important. And then how do you target them? When they're looking for this solution, what do they do? Then you go back to the problem and talk about what are the existing alternatives. What you want to find out is, and this is like, how are they solving the problem now? We'll get into this in the interview. But if they're not solving the problem now, they're not going to pay you to solve it because it's not a problem. What you're looking for is chewing gum, barbed wire, baling wire, sorry, chewing gum, baling wire, sticky notes, oh, well, right now what we do is we export this from Excel, we give it to our receptionist, who then puts it in a PDF and then scans it back in and sends it over to this guy. You're looking for this like super complex process that you could just make a lot easier.
So these are all, this is the hypotheses on the problem and customer segment that you're documenting at first. So let's give an example of that. So in this case, it's a product called vSticky that is actually targeted towards software as a service vendors, and who all are acquiring customers, but also once they're out there need to retain customers. So the problems that this is addressing is it's difficult to manage churn, it's difficult to retain customers, and the way you measure churn is through cohort analysis, and that is very time consuming to do because you have to extract all the data out and run this outside of your systems, and then you actually have to write code to redirect users to loyalty behavior if you're actually going to change any of those things and test those things. The customer segments in this case in the initial hypotheses were software as a service companies. Actually, we said here software as a service companies that were at revenue stage, and then startups, the early adopters, startups and entrepreneurial web companies, and how they're solving it now is a patchwork of analysis software, Google Analytics, platform-based personalization, Excel, email autoresponders for some of for the retention interventions, or doing nothing. So that's a first set of hypotheses on that side. On the solution side, the hypotheses you want to document is how do you solve your problem. So you think about existing alternatives. How do your early adopters address these problems today? Are they doing nothing? And then what are the top features and capabilities that you need to deliver to solve the problem? Don't get into great detail. This is really high level at this point in your business model process. We're talking about a total for the whole business model canvas of 4 to 5 hours, half a day to get all this and maybe get a couple different business models. Brainstorming really to figure this stuff out. So in the vSticky example, the problem is that it's difficult to measure and churn and loyalty. The existing alternatives, Google Analytics, homegrown solutions, outside BI tools, Mixpanel, or Inaction. And the solution is one instant, one-click cohort reporting, which, by the way, Kissmetrics does now. And the problem is that you need to write code to redirect users to loyalty behaviors. And the existing alternatives are either homegrown or Inaction. The solution is a point-and-click set up intervention that any market analyst could do, not just a program. So you kind of go through the rest of your business model. Things that people often miss are things like your cost model and your revenue model and the factors that go into that. I always like to look at those things as on a units basis, so on a per customer basis, what's the cost of acquiring a customer, the cost of servicing lifetime value, the revenue you can get from a customer, those aspects. And then channels and all the other aspects of the model you document, and over time then you start validating these hypotheses.
So, now that you've built out your canvas, you're all set to put together a nice pro forma and go get financing, right?
Wrong.
Everything that you put on that canvas is an assumption. You guessed, but no guessing. You have to go out and you have to figure out, is it right or is it wrong? And the only way to find that out is the market will tell you what's right and what's wrong. So you need to validate your business model. Go out and build what's called a validated learning loop. You're going to take assumptions from your business canvas and go out and ask people through interviews questions that will tell you whether or not that's true. And you have to optimize for learning, not sales. Because, I mean, I'm a natural, born killer when it comes to sales. And when somebody starts telling me about a problem, they're like, my natural urge is, oh man, I could sign a contract right here. But I stopped learning, and I now have a different objective. So you have to recognize that you're there for learning. And it's very, very hard to do. I mean, for me, it's really hard, but you just have to learn that you're not in sales mode.
So when you do problem interviews, and we see this a lot actually, the common mistakes that people do at the beginning, they say, oh, I can speed this process up. I can get feedback from a lot more people if I do surveys. Or I do focus groups and I have 4 or 5 people come in and do things. Or I don't even have to do it because I know the customer. Or really, the only way I can get really any feedback is I have to build it first because no one will understand the concept unless I build it. Or I'm just talking to VCs instead of customers. Or have someone else do maybe market research for you or something like that. So, survey, yes?
One thing, focus groups can be useful because when you talk to someone in an interview, you can get somewhat skewed information because they're talking to you and they are going to be more likely to be positive. In a focus group, you might find out things that people are willing to say they might not otherwise.
Well, remember, I think you're doing,
You got to do both.
you have to do problem interviews. The problem with focus groups is you're going to get groupthink and group dynamics. So unless people are actually, if you're in your mode of selling this stuff is through Tupperware parties, then absolutely, Tupperware parties are focus group. But otherwise, what you're going to get very often is you're going to get someone dominating the conversation and people agreeing and saying yes, yes. So you'll get good feedback from 1 or 2 people, but don't assume that that is really what the rest of them are. Unless your what you're doing is based on group behavior, you're really looking for individual behavior. You have to set this up in such a way that it's not about positive feedback. Initially, you're doing problem interviews. You're talking to them about their problems, right? There's not anything positive or negative about those problems. And when you get to solution, we'll get to that, but you have to, you have to set it up in such a way that you're not selling and trying to sell. As soon as you're trying to sell something, of course, people are either going to be like, some guy's trying to sell me something, or they're going to try to please you and say nice things. You also don't talk to your mom, and well, we're going to get into that, but mom, your sister, your friends, etc., who want to please you. You're trying to reach outside of your direct circle to do this stuff. So, I think focus groups have their place in certain types of things, but I don't think for this type of stuff, for this early stage stuff, it's worth relying on.